Good evening. I am thoroughly amateur, as you can tell by the fact that I have to lean back to get into the frame. I'm going to try a little adjustment of the phone. As you may know, well, as you definitely do know if you've seen what I labeled a test video, because that's what it was. I am now, instead of using the webcam on my laptop, I'm using my phone. I just prop it up in front of me, and it's giving me much better quality than the laptop. Of course, this is a new phone. I've only had it a month, maybe. My old phone wouldn't have provided this good. On the other hand, it's a lot easier than moving the laptop, and I'm not going to explain why that's even a factor. What I'm going to do is show you a bottle. Clyde Mays, I think it's in focus, straight bourbon whiskey. Now, Clyde Mays was an Alabama moonshiner, did 8 months in prison for his illegal activities. It's illegal, it's not wrong to make your own liquor, but that's a whole nother discussion. And then his grandson is involved in this brand, which currently they're distilling. Well, now you can't see the bottle. I have the camera propped up on a book, but you can't see the bottle now. So if you will stand by while I move the book and put the camera where it's been in previous videos. Did I mention this is a thoroughly amateur production? There. I like to have the bottle in the frame, and I've wanted for there. Now it doesn't block me out. I'm still learning. I wanted for a long time to be able to do that like other bourbon channels do, and it just hasn't been feasible with this new setup. It is. And with the phone on the book propped to where it would get a good picture of me, you just couldn't see but about from there up. And I want you to at least get some idea of what I'm drinking. A glass. Gots to have a glass to drink whiskey. I don't know if you heard that, but it popped pretty good. It's earlier than I'm normally able to record, so this is my third glass, and I filled it fuller than I normally would for recording because I have, it's not quite 12. I have 6 hours before I have to go to bed because I work late shifts and I was off today. So, Clyde Mays straight bourbon whiskey. Companies out in Alabama. They distill the juice in Indiana, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, at the big MGP distillery. And in, I believe it was January of this year, they opened their own distillery. So to have straight bourbon whiskey, they'll be able to start bottling in 2027, because the rules of straight whiskey, whether bourbon, rye whiskey, corn whiskey, whatever, the rules of straight whiskey require that it be at least 2 years old. If it's between 2 and 4, it must have an age statement. If it's above 4 years, then there's no requirement for an age statement. I like the fact that Balcones Distilling always puts an age statement on. If they had a 23-year whiskey, they'd still put on there in their idiosyncratic style, aged for at least X number of months in oak. I don't have the ability to do the math in my head and determine what 23 times 12 is. it would be a large number of months. I know 10 years would be 120 months, so 20 years would be 240 months, plus the extra 3 years is 36 months, and I've lost track. I'm not a math genius. My dad could have done it, boom. I ain't him. But this is something I've wanted to try for a while, and I saw a video, Casey Allen of, my brain just went blank, Beautiful Bourbon. If you have not subscribed to his channel, I highly recommend that you do. Casey did a review of this exact whiskey, not this exact bottle, which you might have noticed, by the way, is only a pint bottle, 375 milliliters. But I learned my whiskey terminology, though I wasn't drinking it then, back in the 70s, when it was still a fifth, a pint, a quart, what have you, half pint. And 375 is approximately equal to a pint. There are 2 pints to a quart, by the way. There are 4 quarts to a gallon. They're quarter gallons, quarts. A fifth, or a 750 milliliter bottle is approximately equal to a fifth of a gallon. If they all go to 700 milliliters like Europe does, why are we always imitating Europe? Explain this to me. I see no valid reason. Let them imitate us. We fought a long and difficult war to get loose from Europe. But if some distilleries have, and if they all go to 700 milliliter bottles, then it will be an even more approximate approach to a fifth. But KC did a review of this, spoke highly of it. I trust his palate. He's reviewed things I've never tasted, and so I can't judge there. But when he's reviewed something I know, he and I have tended to agree. And so when he said this was good, I said, okay, I meant to try it. I'm going to go ahead and try it. And as you can see, I've drunk a few glasses. In fact, I had this tag to do a review on Distiller tonight, and I may yet do that. I got the time, as I said, 6 hours. And to get my full detailed reviews, you need to go to Distiller. That's distiller.com. I'm there under my right name, and most places online I use my right name. Nothing wrong with an alias. I prefer to just be me. I'm not trying to put on any kind of front. But this will be as close as I come. I don't think I'm going to put this in my whiskey review playlist. It'll probably be in the Sippin and Talkin playlist, and that's pretty much what I've decided. And I keep putting the glass down. In a video I recorded last night, but which you may not yet have seen because I don't know yet which order I'm going to upload these things, I said that I was going to create a new playlist, and I was thinking of calling it Sippin and Talkin. And that's probably indeed what I will call it. And I realized today that in a certain way I'm doing the same thing as Daniel Whittington is on the Whiskey Vault channel. I'm drinking whiskey and I'm just talking about something. I'm not trying to imitate him. I wouldn't. For one thing, I don't say thing as think. I don't say one think. I don't talk as fast as he does. And although I'm an adopted Texan, I sound a ton more like a Texan than he does, although he's a native. And I didn't deliberately put on some fake Texas accent. This just come natural to me from living in Texas and Oklahoma, and the part of Oklahoma I lived in is very close to how Texas talks. By the way, the only reason God created Oklahoma is to keep Kansas up where it belongs, keep it from sliding south, which I guess is a useful service, keep the Yankees away from us. But anyway, this is going to be a sipping and talking video rather than an official review. And I think probably most of my reviews will be in this playlist simply because it's easier for me to sip and talk than it is to focus straight on a review. But I have been babbling for 10 minutes and I have just nosed the whiskey once, and that ain't right. Sometimes with whiskey I get what I can only describe as a warm note, and I'm getting that here. The very first sniff I took of this, I swore I was smelling baked apples. That has receded, although it's here, the cinnamon and the brown sugar and the apple all mingled in together. There's a butter note in there, at least something buttery. There's alcohol, of course. This is only 92 proof, which is not high proof, but even when you're used to whiskey, it's still alcohol. Just a very homey, attractive nose. Cinnamon and brown sugar are the dominant notes on that first sip. And bourbon has certain characteristics. Among them, cinnamon and brown sugar on the palate and perhaps on the nose. You're going to get certain characteristics with Scottish whiskey, certain characteristics with rye whiskey, certain characteristics with bourbon whiskey. And by the way, don't ever ask, or excuse me, don't ever talk about bourbon and whiskey. Remember this label here? Let me see if I can, there we go. Straight bourbon whiskey. Bourbon is a kind of whiskey. The difference between bourbon and whiskey is exactly the same as the difference between Scotch and whiskey. There is no difference. It's a kind of whiskey. And I don't know why even people who are experts on bourbon and experts on whiskey make that mistake. They speak of the two as though they're different. It's like saying, what's the difference between a Ford and a car? Well, a Ford is a car. Bourbon is whiskey. But bourbon has certain characteristics. Cinnamon and brown sugar are among them. Nose hasn't materially changed after the first sip, but then I've been yapping. And there's that apple. That first sniff I took, baked apples. That first, the first sniff I took, baked apples. The first sip I took out of this bottle, I would have swore I was eating on my mama's baked apples. That's exactly what it tasted like. It has mellowed that down now. It's not near as dominant, but it goes back to what Clyde Mays himself did with his whiskey. Now, mostly he was making White Dog, just unaged corn liquor, and selling it. That's what moonshiners have mostly done, is just sell unaged whiskey. But he would also take some of it and age it in barrels, and that's always a risky proposition because it has to sit there for a period of years. And if the revenuers find it, you've lost all that whiskey and you're going to prison. But in aging the whiskey, he would bake apples in the oven and then cut them up and put them in the barrel. And it would give that whiskey that apple flavor. And if I'm understanding what I've been able to find correctly, they're doing it with this too. Anyway, you get the apple on. There's honey in there, and I frequently get honey. And I mentioned butter earlier. I wouldn't say I frequently get butter, but I get it fairly commonly. And a lot of, in fact, I'm not sure any other bourbon reviewer ever gets butter, but I do. Not on every whiskey, mind. It's a minority of them, but I do occasionally get butter. And I hate to do this. I didn't bring my handkerchief with me, and my allergies are kicking in, so please stand by one. As Aerosmith said, I'm back! No, I'm not Steven Tyler. I sing Sacred Harp, but you don't have to be much of a singer to sing Sacred Harp. I can carry the tenor part as long as I got people around me. I will never be a rock singer, so don't worry, I don't plan to do that much. But I am back in the USSR is what the Beatles sang. And I'm not getting anything on it that I haven't already mentioned, but it's a real pleasing combination. The brown sugar, the cinnamon, the butter, the apples, the honey, it's all melding together. And there are people who will say, well, you're not actually tasting apple, you're not actually tasting honey, you're not actually tasting this or that. You're tasting something that reminds you of that. I say that a difference which makes no difference is no difference. And Spock said that long before I did. If what you taste doesn't just remind you of honey, but tastes like honey, you're tasting honey, even though there is no actual honey in the whiskey. Just say you taste honey. Just say you taste apple. Just say you taste cinnamon, whatever it might be. Let the carping critics split their hairs. I don't care to do that. So, we have Clyde May's straight bourbon whiskey. Now, what does a straight mean, by the way? It means it's at least 2 years old. I've already mentioned that. To be straight, whatever the state is, you've probably heard of straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey. It has to be distilled and aged and bottled in that state. That's why this is not straight Alabama whiskey. They're making it and aging it and bottling it in Indiana. Now, they may be using a particular recipe from Clyde May's. A lot of distilleries, or a lot of brands, claim they're using an old family recipe. Maybe. There are a lot of lies on whiskey labels, just like in any other advertising. You know, they say Elijah Craig made the first bourbon. Well, no, he didn't. There's no proof of that. There is plenty of evidence that other people were making the same type of whiskey that he was about that time. Doesn't take away from what Elijah Craig did. Just means he didn't invent bourbon. So straight whiskey, at least 2 years old, distilled, or to be a straight such and such state whiskey has to be from that state. It cannot contain any additive or artificial additives. Obviously, you can use pure water to proof it down, because it doesn't come out the barrel at 92 proof. Not at all. It has to go into the barrel at least, I believe it's 110 proof. It cannot go into the barrel at any higher than 125. That's for any whiskey, except this one particular category of light whiskey, which is just shy of vodka anyway, and I don't know what the point of light whiskey is. I've never had any. Maybe I'd like some if I had it. Who knows? On that sip I can't decide if it's toffee or caramel. And by the way, I mentioned Casey Allen earlier. It's a beautiful bourbon. He's a Yankee. He's an Ohio guy. He's okay anyways. You know, not all Yankees are evil, believe me. But he pronounces it caramel. And then he'll look right at the camera and say, caramel, if you have a degree. And, you know, to me, it's always caramel, and I never have had a degree. I'm a high school graduate, that's it. But every time he says that, I laugh. You know, he has a finger stir when he's trying, tasting something on ice. There's something else he does. Oh yeah, when he puts the whiskey on ice, he has a gorgeous ice spear. He's hilarious. He is now an executive bourbon steward, which is a title I think it's a Stave and Thief Society confers, and you have to go through a lot of study. You have to go through classes. You have to pass an examination, and so it's not just a meaningless title. It actually does mean you learned something. He's an executive bourbon steward, so he knows what he's talking about. But he don't know how to say caramel right. He thinks it's caramel. Carmel is a city in California. But on that last sip, I got something. It started out being ordinary caramel, but then it began to go off in another direction and kind of made me think of toffee. Who knows? At any rate, I'm already about 8 minutes beyond where I intended to be, so I need to finish this up. We move that out of the way so I can stab the button. And slancha.